what I want to start with is you. You are a Harvard Business School graduate. You were taught a way of marketing, and then in 1995 you started Triggers. Tell me a little bit about your background, and let's start with what made you start Triggers and become an entrepreneur.
I would say that back then I wasn't getting a lot of pickup in the companies that I was working at. It was very difficult to have this point of view that was different from everybody else's. And I really didn't feel that I had the freedom to pursue what I thought was the way. And I set out to start, when I started the company, to really figure out what is the formula for consistent business growth. I mean, I had been trained at Bain & Company, so I had the mind of a consultant, which is to always look for how can we make things better. And I couldn't believe that here I was at companies like P&G and Revlon, Avon, Johnson & Johnson, and the businesses weren't growing. I was like, what's up with that? That if they don't know, that must mean that nobody knows. And I really wanted to figure out a systematized way to institutionalize growth and not be dependent on whether you're creative and had a great idea in the shower.
So that was 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago. And how has the industry changed over those 3 decades?
It's night and day. So when I was starting out, and even when I had clients, there were like just a handful of clients who really were even interested in what I was talking about. And this whole area of behavioral science and neuroscience, I mean, those were not even terms that people threw around back then. I would say for the most part, people still thought, and I would say even some people still think today, that this is some niche practice that they don't need to pay attention to because, you know, it's that thing over here and it doesn't really matter and I'm comfortable with my data and all that kind of thing. But we are seeing a difference now. I would say, honestly, I'd love to say that it's the last 10 years, it's really more like the last 2. Suddenly, people are starting to understand that the instinctive mind, behavioral science is really not a thing that I need to do on the side, but it's sort of the thing. It's the way people make decisions, and if they don't, they realize now that if they don't pay attention to this, they're going to be left behind.
So I know they're realizing this because trying to plan this event and even find time to talk to Leslie, you are busier than anyone I know. You're just constantly getting new client work, new clients wanting to work with you, based on what I understand. You've never been busier. What is actually accelerating this demand? What is in the minds of these clients that they're suddenly waking up and realizing they need you?
I think what's going on is a few things sort of simultaneously. One is, I don't know if people here are familiar with the program or the training program or the book, How Brands Grow by Byron Sharp from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. So that book, and that was done by sort of theorists, by mathematicians, they kind of had this idea that mental availability is what it's all about. And they had it many years ago, but they didn't practice it in the field. But they have been doing this training, which is largely theoretical. So in a way, it's almost like the software and the hardware. They've been laying the hardware down for us and training all of these Fortune 500 marketing departments. And then we come in, and they still don't know how to activate on it, but they have the theory in their head. So now when we come with the actual toolkit for how to make this happen on their brands, we're the software that enables them to make the hardware happen, the application playbook, so to speak, for how brands grow. So that's one big thing. And then I think there's a lot of talk about the mind since the pandemic. There's mental health, there's unconscious bias, there's like all of these things about the mind. Honestly, AI. AI has really fueled interest in how the brain works because it's basically a copy of the human analogic brain, which is all about connecting the dots. We wouldn't have AI if they thought that the brain was still a sequential machine. What we now know is that the brain is a connector. It connects all these things simultaneously. That's how the brand connectome that you just saw works, and that's also how AI works.
starting to realize the importance of the work you've been doing for decades. You're getting increasingly busier. What makes you decide, gee, I'm gonna now somehow make time to write a book while I'm doing all this?
Well, I'm certifiably insane. I mean, there's absolutely no question. I spoke to a friend of mine, maybe you know him, he went to Harvard Business School, his name is David Edelman. He's a professor at Harvard Business School now. He was the CMO at Aetna. And I called him the other day and we were chatting and he's writing a book. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, so you're gonna be doing that while you're teaching at Harvard? He goes, oh no, I'm taking a year off. And I was like, oh, that's what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to take a year off and do my book separately. No, it's crazy. Yeah, my husband always says, I need to clone myself. So when we figure that out, please let me know, because maybe somebody can actually go on a date with him.
But what made you feel like you needed to put this in? I mean, I think what's so powerful is that you're saying things that certainly when I read them, and I think everyone here when you read them, makes so much sense, but completely defy everything, certainly that I was taught at Harvard Business School and that most people understand. You saw that from Leslie's presentation. So what made you feel you needed to put this in a book?
I mean, I think that I'm getting older. I feel like I have a sense of, I want to have a legacy, of all the things that I've learned. I want to also, I want to teach everybody else kind of the pain that I've gone through, and maybe they can avoid some of that pain. I mean, the fact is that if you use these techniques, your business will do better. And I feel like we're doing it all wrong. In fact, it's almost like it's upside down, because we're spending more time on the thing that's the least influential in the mind, when we need to be focused on the thing that actually calls the shots. So I just feel like it's time to put it all together and to come out and share it with really everybody. Nothing could please me more than if this approach were used everywhere. Like, I think it should be, because this is how the brain works, so why would we go around fighting that?
So I think in business school it's very common for us to put labels on things. Your book is called Power of Instinct, and you've called something that I think is being ushered in the age of instinct. So tell me about that. I mean, when did this really become the age of instinct? Can you talk a little bit more about it from a sort of era standpoint?
That's a great question. I think that we have been in various eras of marketing in particular. So back in the 1960s, it was all about demographics, and it was pretty superficial. That's how we looked at people. Then we kind of went through this era of segmentation, where we slice and dice people and audiences into a million different pieces, and that didn't work very well either, because honestly, if a brand starts meaning different things to different people, it stops being a brand. And nobody can ever act on that anyway, because they don't have a big enough budget to market to 16 different segments. And then we went through the era of purpose. I'm sure you've all heard about brand purpose. So there was a big push for that. And again, that didn't really yield the growth results that people wanted. So I feel like now people are finally recognizing and going to that deeper level of something is happening at the unconscious level that drives people's decisions, and it actually is completely linked to business growth. So I feel like we crossed over into that. I think somewhere around 2021, 22, like when AI came out, I think a combination of things all together, and I think what we're going to see is that there's going to be this appreciation of how our minds affect everything in every industry, because we're seeing clients, from everywhere: HCPs, healthcare providers, compliance, compliance to your medications. All of these things are behavioral. There's a RFP out right now by the MTA looking for a behavioral science firm to help them figure out how to get people to not skip their fares when they get on the bus or the subway. They're not doing it the conventional way with a brand strategy firm. They're looking for a behavioral science company. So I think this is starting to really penetrate in areas that we've never seen it before. And half of our business right now is B2B, which you would never think that it would be, because most people initially, when they speak to me, they say, oh, you must be a CPG, you must have all just CPG clients. But actually, much of our business right now is financial services and insurance.
So talk to me about that. How is it different B2B, or how is it completely not different? And maybe if you have an example.
So clients, again, and marketing leaders initially think that B2B buyers all make decisions on rational factors, that it's about cost and features and benefits, and some of that is true, but after you're in a certain ballpark and you've got the features and the benefits and the cost, then that's when the instinct kicks in. And we have been able to show our clients, our B2B clients, that the B2B buyer, whether it's an HR director or an investment manager or a retirement plan sponsor, that they have connectomes that are filled with all of these different associations that they never even considered. And so what this is giving them is a whole new toolkit of things where they don't just have to rely on cost. They don't just have to rely on products and features and benefits and services, but rather there are these intangibles that they really need to know about. And it's giving them what I call the instinct advantage, a different kind of competitive advantage.
So they need to know about it, but how do they find out about it? I mean, sometimes it's harder to figure those out.
Yeah.
Certain brands than others, right?
Yes, it's hard to figure out, but we do that kind of work all the time. We use a technique called memory elicitation. So we're not asking people what they like, we're not asking people what they dislike. The word appeal does not enter the equation because we found that not to be predictive of sales. This is all about associations. What are the associations you have with this insurance provider? What are the associations you have with this financial manager? It's all about associations, and that is what speaks volumes and really tells you. Because what we're doing is we're comparing the mind of the people you have to the people you don't. And that shows you the footprint, back to the brand connectome, that you can actually now start to follow to turn somebody who's not a user into a user. Does that make sense?
So there's so many ways that you debunk everything that we all learned. And one of them is this idea that new customers are more valuable than existing customers.
Yeah. So again, most of us have been taught that we should spend all of our time speaking and learning from our existing customers. In fact, I think a recent Gartner survey said that 78% of chief marketing officers were going to sell existing products to existing customers in the coming year. And that the thought is that that's going to be the easiest. That's why they do it. But the problem is this: every franchise is a leaky bucket. I think of the core customer as a trap. Don't get me wrong, I love my core customers, and we all should treat them very well. We should give them white glove service. But if you spend all of your time on your core customers and you're not filling that leaky bucket, because there's churn in every franchise, then you're not pulling in enough of the growth target for the people that you're losing. And that's how brands start to stagnate and decline. So what we do is we spend a lot of time with the growth target, understanding what their negative associations are, what their barriers are, their implicit barriers, the ones that don't show up in traditional research, and then we are able to help them create a strategy to bring those people over.
So one of the things I thought was fascinating in your book is that it's almost like you never have to give up. It doesn't really matter how bad your negative connectome has become, as long as you can really start to put those positives. But you have to, I think you call it layering. You have to do it in the right way. And you've got a lot of examples in the book, and I'm wondering if you could talk about one or just talk about that whole process.
Yeah, I mean, it's about early and often. You want to have as large a connectome as possible, and it's not like you want just one type of associations. They're all different types of associations that go into the connectome. It's your benefit, it's your expertise, it's your brand image. Maybe there's a nostalgic element, a force from parents or family. All of these things are in the connectome. It's very holistic. I think that most people think about a brand as a logo, a package, a product. That's not your brand. You really need to think about a brand this way. A brand is known by the associations it keeps. That's what a brand is. The more associations it has, the better, because it's connected to all these things in your life that you care about. One of the stories I tell in the book is about Harry Potter. Why is Harry Potter so incredibly successful to multiple generations? I mean, it just keeps going. And why do parents and children all love it equally well? It's because Harry Potter creates connections to all different parts of our lives, to school, to the summer vacations, to sports. You know, their Quidditch is our basketball. And all of these different connections to all our different, it's basically a mirror image of our world. And so that's really how we need to think about building our connectome. Try to touch as many parts of your target's lives as humanly possible. Don't think about your brand as this like isolated thing over here. That's why partnerships are so successful and so important. A lot of brands shy away from partnerships because they think, oh, that other brand's gonna get the spotlight, the other brand's gonna, get more attention. No, partnerships are fantastic because now you're connecting your brand to more things in people's minds.
So the other thing that you talk about, and I think this is a little bit nuanced, but I will bring it to the debate because Trump has often said, there's no bad publicity, more publicity is better. You talk about how really it's better to have this larger connectome, and that there could be a brand that's all positive, but if it's a small connectome, it's going to lose out to the larger connectome, even if there's some negative in there. So I want to sort of just tease out a little bit more this idea, and you talked about a lot of this larger connectome, and how a brand that has so few can take advantage of that. And I think that's what you're talking about, but a little bit more, because I think it's so different than the way that we usually think about it. It's okay to have a little bit of negative.
It's okay to have a little bit of negative, just not too much. So as soon as your ratio of positive to negative goes south and you've got more negative than positive, then the brand, we've seen consistently, the brand is either stagnant or in decline. And we can actually see it by looking at the connectome. If it has like 50 to 60% negative associations, the brand is declining. So a little bit is okay, but not a lot. And most importantly, if you think about the negative associations as like the dead leaves on a tree, then what you really want to do is nip those dead leaves, get rid of them as fast as possible. But you can't do that if you don't know what they are. And that's why it's so important to monitor the brain of your growth target, the people you don't have. Your core customer is a trap. They are never going to tell you what's wrong with you. You can only find that out from the people you don't have. Your growth target, they have negative associations that are brewing. And in a way, it's an early warning system. It's predictive in nature because you can see where your sales are going to be next year by looking at the negative associations. If you have a lot of them, I don't care if you spend $100 million on advertising, they're not coming over. If you have a few, you might be okay. If you've got none, then you can almost think about this as a way to figure out what your supply chain should be, right? You can see the future by understanding the mind of the growth target is predictive.
So I think, and I will leave this topic in a second, but this idea of layering that I got, and maybe you'll tell me if I got this right, is that you've got to have some sort of connection to these other leads. So you had an example of Jeopardy, which ultimately did it well after a lot of false tries, and then you have this example of Palmolive, which, personally I remember so well those commercials with, you're soaking in Palmolive, from the manicurist. That did it terribly and lost so much brand share because of it. And I think that what is interesting is this idea that you can't change too quickly, which is important. And this is, I think, when things aren't going well, you want to just throw out the old and just start something new. And that's where I think a lot of the old conventional wisdom is so wrong that you point out.
Oh, 100%. That is one of the biggest dangers. So every brand needs to evolve. You cannot rest on your laurels. You cannot keep the brand the same. But the mistake that a lot of brands make is that they do a revolution instead of an evolution. And if you do that, you do a pull of 180 on consumers, you're not only going to lose the people that you had, because now they no longer recognize your brand, you're also not going to bring in the new, and then that's when declines really start to happen. And we see this all the time, because brands get frustrated, they think that they need to make a change really quickly, and they do make a change too fast, and that was the Palmolive story. They had something really meaningful in people's minds, the person at the salon who was taking care of the nails, you have to read the story.
Most of you old enough to remember
Anyway, that person that celebrity was actually a distinctive brand asset in people's minds, and they just threw the baby out with the bathwater, and suddenly sales start, plummeting. So it's really important to, first of all, know what you have. Know what is meaningful in people's minds, and make sure you don't change those too quickly, like the Tropicana story, where they took the orange and the straw off the package, and sales plummeted again overnight. So you definitely want to hold on to those distinctive brand assets, because those are anchors in people's minds that you don't want to let go of.
And the measurements also are often so misunderstood. So I don't know if you just want to say 1 second about the Jeopardy, but I thought it was so fascinating because all these really smart people are thinking, oh, I get it, it's not working because they don't like this new co-host. But it's not that. It's because it's not associated with the brand. I thought that was fascinating. So I don't know if you want to say a couple minutes about that.
Yeah, the gentleman who was ultimately chosen as the host, and I'm blanking on his name right now.
This is when Alex Trebek passed away, so they needed a new Jeopardy host.
Yeah, they needed a new Jeopardy host, and so they had a parade of people. I don't even know, Katie Couric, all these famous celebrities, and one after another, the ratings of the show just kept going down and down and down. And the interpretation on the part of the producer was, oh my God, they don't like this one, they don't like that one, they don't like this one. What we believe is that it had nothing to do with like, it had to do with the fact that none of these people had any connection to the brand. And it was sort of like a foreigner coming in and changing the brand too abruptly. Ultimately, what they did is they found somebody who actually was a big winner on the show and was a phenomenal host and very connected to the brand, and his ratings were fantastic. But again, it wasn't because people liked him, it was because he fit with people's conceptions of the brand, and he was a memory already in their connectome.